Jam chucks are a great versatile way to hold projects on your lathe. In this video I want to show you the different ways you can use jam chucks, how you can make jam chucks, how you can secure your wood on tightly. We know if you can't hold it on the lathe, you can't turn it. So if it's something you're interested in, keep watching. So what is a jam chuck? Well, let's just ask ChatGPT, a artificial intelligence app. Alexa, use ChatGPT to explain what a jam chuck is for a wood lathe.
A jam chuck is a piece of equipment used in wood lathes. Its main function is to hold the wood being worked on firmly and safely. It does so by creating a friction-fit cavity or surface in the lathe's headstock, allowing the wood to be securely held in place as it is turned.
A lot of folks use jam chuck and friction chuck interchangeably, but I make a distinction where I'd call this a friction chuck, something that you're going to wedge a bowl against, for example, that requires tailstock support. To me, that is a friction chuck. A jam chuck, on the other hand, as Alexa explained to us, holds the wood on the headstock without the requirement for tailstock support. Not to mean you would not use your live center as long as possible, as safely possible or convenient, but it's designed not to require tailstock support. So why do we even care about a jam chuck? What's it good for? Well, number one, we use it because it's very quick and versatile once you get the hang of it. It can fit many different size projects of a very wide variety. It doesn't leave marks on a piece of wood like scroll chuck jaws might, whether they stain them or they have little indentions that could mar the work, and that's not something you want. You can use it for finishing off, as I just explained, differently from a friction chuck without the requirement for tailstock support. So here's an example of a small jam chuck for this small bowl. You can easily make these. They're a great chucking solution for a lot of turning projects. One of the major advantages is there's no chucking marks on the project. Secondly, as you can see here, it runs true. Free it up. Normally you can just tap on the side of your chuck and it'll just pop right out. Normally. I think one of the most common uses of a jam chuck is when you're using the base of a box to jam the lid on to finish the top. It's something we do all the time. Another option is when you're reversing a box to clean up the bottom of the box using a scrap of wood to make a jam chuck, as shown here. You see, this jam chuck really is a great chucking technique. It just takes a little practice, get a little confidence, but it works. Alright. I had finished a couple of awls when I realized the handles were just a little too large, so I had used a jam chuck to remount the awl, and it was strong enough to even hold it with a burn wire. If you don't make as many mistakes as me, you won't need to figure out how to jam chuck one of these things to repair it. So I've got to make that top just a little bit smaller and maybe hollow out just a little bit deeper. Jam chuck like this. It helps when you have a hole because it makes it a little easier for you to tap this out. Let's see if it works any better. This rook box required a little different sequence on the lid, where I had finished the top of the lid and then I had to figure out how to jam chuck it in order to hollow out the lid. A little different sequence, and the jam chucking worked great. Jam chucking was almost essential for turning the head of this whimsical owl in order to do some of the shaping, including drilling a hole and carving the nose. It can work for larger projects such as this jewelry box. Okay, I put the bottom onto the jam chuck made out of the scrap. I've used a little painter's tape to hold it. And okay, I'm using a jam chuck I use for finishing eggs. Rub just a bit of chalk in there to give it a little more grip. I'm going to just center it as best I can. It doesn't fit as well as I'm taking it in the right direction, so bring this side down first. Okay, that's just enough to keep it flying out, not really enough to hold it. Whoa! That's what happens when you don't have that tailstock support. So what that tells me is I need a little more support here, so I'm going to use a little tongue awl. Spit on it a little bit here. Just enough to raise the fibers. This is a pretty snug fit. So I just put that on there. Let it sit there for a moment while those fibers swell. No, I think I'm going to need a little piece of tissue. I'm going to use, closest thing I got to tissue is this Bounce anti-static thing from I clean my glasses with, and it's super thin. Light cuts. Probably got a little aggressive. So what kind of wood do you use for make jam chucks with? The answer is easy, free wood. I made jam chucks out of MDF. Some folks will advocate hardwood, some folks will advocate softer wood. I think it depends on what you're chucking, but I use pine a lot. Here's one that I made out of a piece of construction 2x6, I guess. It really doesn't make a lot of difference what kind of wood as long as it's dry. Pine, poplar, and most any type of bowl blanket. I use a threaded glue block to hold this one. Here's an example of a piece of pine I could use for a large bowl, and I simply put a recess on the back to put it in a chuck. And I just haven't had a need to use it because I generally use a vacuum chuck, but I did want to show you this technique. All right, let me see if I can take this this scrap pine. Got a busted out piece here. For a jam chuck, this will fit over, and let's see if that'll work. I've only got to take off maybe 1/8 of an inch. So let's just come in this way. We realize if we come in straight on this way, we're going to pluck up that end grain, and we're going to have a mess on our hands. So we just come in slightly. Alright, let's see how we're doing. No, a little more. Okay. Too much and it'll split the box, so I want to ease that just the tiniest little bit. Okay. That's got it. That's a nice good fit. I use green wood, just a scrap of a branch or a small tree to hollow it out. It works. If it's a little bit damp, it can help hold it. It doesn't have to be damp. It could be dry. If it's damp and green, after you use it, it's going to change shape, and you may have to reshape it next time you use it. But that's okay. But something like this, you can use it over and over and over again. I keep a box of spindle scraps left over from other projects, whether it's boxes, ornaments, or what have you, because I can often use these for a jam chuck for some project. They're already round, they already have a tenon on them. I've used dogwood. It could be a piece that's too nasty or damaged to use for anything else. It's got bug holes all in it, but it worked fine for a jam chuck. I like to drill a hole through the back end because if something gets stuck in there, you can use that to release it. So why does a Morse taper securely hold items like chucks or drive centers on a lathe? Well, the secret is that 1.5 degree slope, and that's what most jam chucks, we try to get something like a 1.5% slope. Now we don't bother to measure it. It's just a very, very slight slope, so the wood will actually start to fit and wedge in. So sometimes the jam chuck is a recess, sometimes it's overfitting. For a bowl, it could be either way, but the key I think is that 1.5% slope on each side. The most common overfitting example is when you're putting a lid on the base of a box and using the box base as a jam chuck, but here's an example where I'm putting the base on a jam chuck as an overfitting one. Okay. The key is you make the diameter about 1/64 smaller than the object you're going to put on it, and let me put this back in here so I don't have to hold it. And you're going to do a very slight taper, about 1 to 2 degrees. So make it 1/64 smaller. The object that's going to be tapped in there needs to have a slight chamfer, and it's got to be faced off to run true because it's going to register against the bottom. That's how it runs true. So you can, I've already got this made. I'm not going to actually cut it, but I'm just going to show you. In terms of tools, you can use you can use a lot of tools. You can use a beading and parting tool, and again, don't come in straight. Tilt it just a little bit as you make that angle. A square type box scraper works very well, and it's probably what I used for this when I actually made it. Or you can use a parting tool can work as well. Any number of tools. Just make a flat wall, a flat straight wall, and just tilt it in just slightly, because actually this thing is acting very similar to a Morse taper. So it's going to fit in there and start getting snug, and then you're just going to pop it in place like that with your hand, and normally you'll just hear it pop. Out of calipers, so I've got a pretty good idea how much I've got to come in. It's like I said that jam chucking is where you normally hold it on one side and it doesn't have to be secured on the other. I want to distinguish between another chucking method, and that's using a mandrel, such as what I used in my recent pillbox video. And they can be different sizes. Mandrel basically is a shaft that goes into a hole. One that you're probably mostly familiar with is a pin mandrel. But it's used for any number of things. Here's an example of a mandrel I used for reverse chucking a tulip. Let's see if I can pop it out this time. There we go. And that's how they normally easily come out. But when it doesn't, here's the other great tip. Let me show you. When you do make one of these, first of all, if I wanted to make this go away, I could turn this down, but then that would sacrifice that chuck for future use. So the other way is when you do make them, sometimes it's handy to have a little hole in it that you can put a rod in. I'll probably scratch the bowl, but that'd be all right. Put this little pin in it and just tap it, and out it comes, and it didn't do any damage to the bowl. So let me show you how I solve that problem when you get one that's too tight. I'm going to take a thin parting tool and make a part just a little bit, maybe a 1/16, 1/8 of an inch away from the edge. Then I can go down stick the parting tool with the lathe off, of course, and wedge it down in there and kind of wedge it a little bit like I was opening up a can of paint. And sometimes, like in this case, it's breaking off. I've got to go around and keep trying on other edges. But you've got wood on wood instead of metal on wood, so it doesn't damage the edge of the piece you're turning at all. So this is a great technique. Pretty snug fit, so let me just use a pocket knife to help get it off. Okay, now trick's gonna be, can I get this thing out of here? Oh, that's gonna be a challenge. Put this drill bit in here. Okay, think of jam chucks as just another tool in your chucking arsenal. It goes along with between centers or scroll chucks or threaded glue blocks or screw chucks. The more you use a jam chuck, the more comfortable you're going to get, and the more times you're going to find it gets you out of a jam. If you missed a video I had on the difference between a friction and a jam chuck that covers a little different material, you might want to click on the link below. If you enjoyed this video, I'd appreciate it if you give it a like. If you're not a subscriber, please click on the subscribe button so you won't miss future videos. If you had a chucking problem that was solved with a jam chuck, please leave it in the comments below. And remember, y'all stay safe. Come on back, you hear?